welcome to Journeys in Music. Today we're talking to Amy Hillis, who is currently living in Montreal and working at York University in Toronto. So the pandemic has done many things for us. As we get started, part of our tradition at the University of Regina is to acknowledge the land that we are on, to acknowledge we are not the first people to make music here or learn music or share music. Our Indigenous brothers and sisters have been doing that for hundreds and thousands of years before us. The University of Regina is situated on the territories of the Nehiyawak, Anishinaabeg, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota, and the homeland of the Métis-Michif Nation. University of Regina is on Treaty 4 lands with a presence in Treaty 6. So again, welcome. Amy, do you want to tell us, I know you and I were chatting earlier and you said that you took lessons, you were within walking distance of the Conservatory in Regina, and now you're in Montreal. Do you want to just say, and I know you probably know all the people that are here, but I will ask you maybe just say a few things about what you're doing these days, and then we'll dive into the questions that I've got.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, so I am thrilled to be one of these weekly speakers that you have, Christa, as part of the Conservatory's Journeys in Music series, which I think is just fabulous, because I know growing up, it was so nice to be able to hear from older students, older people who had gone through the program, and then I'd be inspired to, maybe actually practice, maybe when I'm part of the program myself. So yeah, I grew up in Regina, lived there in, the same house in the Cathedral Village since I was born until when I left for university when I was 17. And I went to the conservatory. I started violin lessons there with Kathy Butler, Suzuki lessons. So that included both the group lessons and the individual lessons. And I remember very distinctly that the group lessons were a real feature that I enjoyed, because I could get to know other people who enjoyed this weird instrument that no one at my school played. I'm the eldest of 4 sisters, so I was also the first person in my house to play an instrument. That changed very quickly though, but so it was nice to be able to go to the group lessons and sort of have that conservatory community. And then that continued with these incredible ensembles that the conservatory had. So we had, for example, I started string orchestra with Howard Layton Brown. He was the very first conductor I ever had, which, for those of you who don't know, Howard Layton Brown was he's no longer with us, but he was an incredible violinist, performing violinist and conductor from Regina, and taught at the university at the conservatory rather, out of Dark Hall. And he ran the string orchestra. And then my teacher at the time, his name was Edward Minovich, and he used to be the concertmaster of Regina. He then took over that string orchestra, and he and Sandra Cosby created this Amadeus Orchestra. And that was honestly like one of the highlights of my week, because not only did we get to play really cool arrangements, really cool repertoire that Ed would do for us, everything from tangos to Hockey Night in Canada to Pink Panther to like you name it. And plus, he would play Chardash for us whenever we got bored. So that was a real highlight. And that's where I got to know people that I still am like super close with today, these incredible friends, this incredible community, and people that even if we live in separate places now, whenever we come back to Regina, we get together and we commiserate and we reminisce and all of the above. So anyways, that was one ensemble. Then there was also the conservatory choirs I was part of for I don't know how long, but that was an amazing weekly hour that we had just to sing together. And it was kind of nice that it wasn't violin related, because I got to do something musically that wasn't just for people who had the fortunate privilege to play the violin. So people that I knew from ballet classes at, in other companies or schools or and just it brought a lot of different people together in the same building. And then the other thing I wanted to mention were the summer string camps, which happened every summer at the conservatory. Those were run by an incredible faculty of people. A lot of members from the RSO were there. So like I remember my teacher would play as part of a quartet with Cameron Lowe, Brian Johnson, and John, still the current principal violist of RSO. And they would play, like, for example, the Joplin quartets were such a hit. I remember waiting till that last piece of the day, and they would play an arrangement by Scott Joplin of The Entertainer. And it was just, we were on our feet by the end of it in what was formerly the recital hall. So all these experiences, it's like, I think people think that, oh, yeah, you took lessons there and that's where it stops. But actually, I don't think I would be a violinist today without those ensemble experiences. I never wanted to play violin, and this is different for some people, I will say, but I never wanted to play violin specifically for practicing it by myself, or for specifically being a soloist, or for specifically just enjoying the joy of the instrument by myself in my own room. Of course, there's a bit of that, and I've tried to embrace that as much as I can this past year, but that's not the reason why I wanted to become a musician. And I think those experiences as part of those groups at the conservatory, I'm not saying this just to please anyone, but that was what I think instilled this incredible joy of music, that I really thought, okay, this isn't worth letting go. This isn't worth, this is worth pursuing. So just to sort of stay on track, then I went to McGill University, did my baccalaureate degree there in violin performance, did my master's in San Francisco, came back to Montreal, did my doctorate at McGill, and now I teach at York University as a music professor.
Wow. That's a lot of music education. I'm just going to start there. I'm just going to say that's a lot of music education. So I'm just going to go back for just a minute to ask, so were your mom and you were the oldest, you said, so were your mom and dad musical? And is that why they put you in was it Child Parent Strings when you did it, or was it just straight Suzuki? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it was. And yes, they are musical. They're not professional musicians though. And I would say that was an interesting part of, well, for example, so Colleen, I hope you don't mind, your camera's still on, I'm pointing you out, but Colleen's daughter also grew up in the Child Parent Strings program, right, Colleen? Yeah, because I know that Chloe was a year ahead of me, but then the years kind of came together at a certain point. And all this to say, Colleen is also not a professional musician herself, but like my parents, and I think like a lot of parents of people I studied violin with, they had a true appreciation for music education and what it can give a student. And I don't think Colleen and, my dad who's here would say that they thought Chloe and I would become professional musicians. In fact, I didn't think I would become a professional musician myself until like my very last year of high school. So I think that almost made it stronger in a way, because there was no end goal. The goal was, well, let's give a platform for our children to be a part of a community that's outside of their normal school and develop skills that they can't develop at school as easily, or perhaps with the same kind of individual attention. There's certain things about playing in an orchestra that you just can't learn in a classroom. You can learn as part of a hockey team maybe, but it's very similar that way. And then of course, the ear training and the listening skills, which you can't learn as easily as part of a ballet class. So I think it was that well-rounded education that they wanted to provide.
Interesting. Okay, so if you were not planning to become a professional musician until your last year of high school, what shifted at that point? Do you remember? Like, yeah,
so I was really fortunate. In fact, this also, everything comes back to the conservatory, because I remember auditioning for the National Youth Orchestra of Canada when I think the first time I auditioned, I was 15 maybe. I didn't get in the first time, but the reason why I said it was because all these auditions took place at Dark Hall at the conservatory. And so I have these memories of doing the auditions there, but it was actually not a negative memory. It was actually really, it was Steve McClellan who was doing the auditions, and he just would, not say much at all, but create a really inviting space, and it was fine. Then the second time I auditioned, I did end up getting in, and so I I went and I had just a fabulous summer. It was really fun. But I was just kind of one of many people, one of very few people from Saskatchewan, but one of many violinists as part of the orchestra, and one of the youngest. Though at that time, NYO, most of the violinists were under 19 years old. It's not like it is now. Anyways, I'm getting to the last year, the second year I did NYO. That was part of the reason why I decided, okay, this might not just be a hobby anymore. This might be something I actually want to pursue, because not only did I have such a fun experience, which those of you who've done NYO know that it can be super fun, like being a part of any orchestra, is the same experiences I had with Amadeus Orchestra, South Saskatchewan Youth Orchestra, but this was sort of just, that evolution of that. But I also there was one particular teacher there who gave me some leadership opportunities that I hadn't had before on that scale. And I had this sense of, oh, I can actually accomplish something. I can actually contribute something with my skills, with my strengths, that aren't just about getting good grades or doing what the teacher asks. It's actually like coming from who I am as a person. And that gave me that experience. And so I thought, okay, let's see where this goes. Why not try and pursue it at university? And then just kind of went from there.
Awesome. Okay, so I've heard you talk a little bit. I've heard you talk about the importance of community, and how you don't necessarily want to be a solo musician, other than the last year, but that hasn't been your driving force in music. So what are you passionate about in music?
Yeah, I totally, you're right on the head. I actually, I love the way you put it, because it is this idea of community. To me, music is a vehicle for bringing a community together. So even in the solo, part of like a duo last year doing these recitals with Megan Malatz, even then, the whole goal was to bring communities together by celebrating music that was from their own communities. So for example, in Regina, we played music by David McIntyre. We had David McIntyre at the concert. The Regina Musical Club put on this incredible show that was a true celebration of, okay, this is the Regina music community. And we even had like students from the conservatory who were playing David's pieces come, and they're able to talk with him and hear another work by professional musicians who had come out of that community. So to me, it was okay, that was one of the most rewarding concerts I've ever played, because it really did feel like this is a celebration of community, and it is so what I want to be able to do with the violin. And yeah, so you can do that with solo projects, and I love doing it with chamber projects as well. And the other one would be the Horizon String Quartet, where for the past, we've done 7 tours. So we couldn't do it last year, but we've done 7 tours in total to rural and urban centers, communities in Saskatchewan and Manitoba. We do usually about 40 concerts as part of the tour, every tour. And we go into communities and we basically share what it is to have the community of the string quartet, even though it's only 4 people. And then we create an interactive presentation with that community so that we can get their feedback, and we can get, so it's for schools. So mainly school assemblies will have like 300 kids in a gym that we play for, but then they'll be able to ask us questions, do activities with us. And basically what we're trying to do is cultivate a sense of this music is for not just us 4 people who live with it and play it, but for you, it's for your community. It's for, there's a whole variety of stuff that's part of this heading of string quartet classical music. So you pick what you want from it and see what you resonate with and then run with it.
Cool. So I'm assuming, because if you're in rural schools, like most of the schools don't have string programs, right? Like, we don't have string programs in Regina even. So what kind of questions do the kids ask about?
Yeah, they ask great questions. They ask everything from how heavy is the cello to what made you when did you guys start playing together? That's one that we get a lot.
Mm.
They also want to know how old we all are, which is like one we get almost every time. And I think that's a really special question because they're trying to sort of figure out, they know that we're not usually as old as their parents, but at the same time, they know that we're not as old as the oldest kids in their school. So they're kind of trying to put some pieces together and see how accessible the music is to them. And then, oh, they always ask, why do you guys make faces when you play? And I make a lot of faces when I play. And also in a string quartet, you make a lot of faces because that's how you communicate. I mean, sometimes. And so we have to sort of say, well, sometimes it's so that we play together, and other times it's just because we're having a good time and that's the face we make. But yeah, they really show that they're engaged by the questions that they ask, because yeah, the questions are not to make them make their teachers happy. They're questions to really be like, what is this? Like, I've never seen this before. So like, or how does the instrument work? We got that question so much that we actually created a presentation one year about how the instrument works, about the tension of the strings, about how there's these different parts, because we don't have chords, we don't have plugins like a guitar would if they're playing on a stage. And so this was really hard for the kids to understand. They understand that, okay, a trumpet's loud, it works, and you blow through it, it's a horn, I get that. But a violin, you got to stick with horsehair on it and a box like that. The physics are like pretty mind-blowing. So there was one year where we really tried to explain that, and we even did a bit of a science experiment to show tension, tighten the E string as high as it could go, and until it popped. And that got all the grade 7 boys going. It was really, yeah. So anyways, just to kind of bring them into the world and make it not something that's so foreign to them.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So okay, so I'm just looking at my list of questions, and so you spent, I don't know how many, I would say, how many years did you spend in university? Like 12?
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah, 11, 12. Yeah, so I started at McGill in 2008, and I graduated from McGill with the doctorate in 2018. No, maybe it is 2019.
Yeah, so about 11 years in university. So somewhere along the way in those studies, you decide, okay, I can do, well, you've decided in high school, I can do something with this. And then you spend 11 years in university. Somewhere along the way, you've decided, I'm going to make money at this. Like, how did you make that? Did you actually make a decision, or you just went, well, I'm going to go do this now, and it just kind of happened?
Yeah, it's so different for each person. In terms of my case, I was really inspired by when we first got our first grant it was actually from the Saskatchewan Arts Board, and I say we because it was for the Horizon String Quartet project. And that was a project, and it still is, where I was like doing something that no teacher had ever taught me how to do. It was very much basically the guys I play with, we were like, okay, this is a need that needs to be filled, and we're passionate about this. We love playing cool music that kids will like, and I'm pretty good at talking to a group of kids. So let's make this happen. And then we realized, oh yeah, we happen to know people who work at schools and make it happen, and do a pilot project first. All that to say that was the first example I think where I created a project that was purely based on just what I want to do, not based on making money. 100% just, I got to do this. And then it was like, okay, how can you do it so that it's feasible? And then when I got the grant, I was like, whoa, like the government will actually support me to do exactly what I want to do. That's not always the case. Sometimes you don't get grants. That's happened to me just as much as well, but it is really cool when you feel like, okay, I'm not doing this for the money. I'm not doing this because we all need to make a living. We all need to put, to be able to eat and pay rent. But when you're able to just sort of envision a project, and usually when it's so clear and so convincing, then the government will be like, okay, we'll help make this happen. And at the end of the day, it's, really not that much money that you need in order to make it happen. So it's possible. So that was, I got really lucky, because that was a real positive reinforcement for me of like, okay, you don't have to do things in music that you don't want to do at this point just to make money. I'm not saying that's always the case. And of course, I've done a lot of gigs that I don't necessarily need to do again, but I needed to have work that week. So I'm not saying it's that simple, but I was really lucky to have positive reinforcement that, yeah, if you create a project, try and convince other people that it's important, it sometimes works out. And so, yeah, it's a lot of luck.
It's interesting though, because you're not the first musician I've talked to that talks about the grant system. And the grants are really important. And so I don't know if you work, I know in our office, we also work with we've been working with the Sask Arts Board to create some projects, but did you have advice on how to write a grant, or you just stumbled in? Like, how do you learn, like, where do you learn the skills to write grants that are successful? And I can see from your face and the way you talk about it, that first grant, you were so passionate about it, that was probably a big factor in being successful. But as you say, you don't always get the money that you ask for in a grant. So are there specific things that you had to learn, or that you have learned over the years that help you in writing the grants?
Yeah, I was, again, really lucky to be able to sit down. Now I'm going to forget her name, but the person at the time, so this was when Culture on the Go was still existed as part of the Saskatchewan Arts Board's touring grant leg. And the rep with Saskatchewan Arts Board for Culture on the Go was fabulous. I was able to, and I should be fair, most grant reps are like this, where you can call them, have a really good conversation with them before you submit the grant about your proposal, so that you can have a bit of a sounding board, and they can sort of say, they can give you a bit of feedback before you write the proposal, because usually they're not on the jury, but they're the ones who like oversee the whole process, so they know what the jury is grading you on. So that was, in that case, that's what really helped. And I would say with my Canada Council grants too, that's what does it, as if you can have that sit down with the person who's the rep for that particular grant. For the Horizon String Quartet, it was actually in person in Regina on Broad Street. We had a meeting. It was super, super helpful. And yeah, but it doesn't have to be in person. It can be via phone, obviously. And so, but it just really, I think, helps answer those questions, because otherwise all you're going off of is the actual sheet that's online. And then you just have to revise and try again, and certainly not get discouraged when you don't get them, because that's also part of life. But I think the stronger and more clear your project is, so yeah, for us from the get-go, it was really clear to us what we wanted to do. We were willing to be flexible with, for example, the school boards. Like, we would talk with the advisors with each school board that we were working with, to sort of see what would be the best way to go about doing this. Here's what we have to offer, but like, how can we do this with your schools? But then once you get that sorted out, you've basically cleared it all up for whatever grant panel is adjudicating your proposal. And so they can sort of see, oh, well, yeah, this all makes sense. They only need $15,000 to do this. Okay, fine, here you go. It's so, yeah, but it is a lot of luck, for sure. There's no way around that. And it's not a sure system.
I'm guessing it's a lot of work too.
Yep. And there's a lot of work you put in, and then sometimes zero of that work pays off immediately because you don't get the grant. But usually you can use that proposal for a future grant. So, but yeah, it's not a sure process, and it can be really disheartening. And I felt that too. So it's, yeah, there's no one way, but certainly if I had any advice for someone writing a grant, it would be call the representative for that award, because that just clears everything up.
Okay, that's awesome. So what does a typical workday look like for you?
Well, right now it's very strange.
Okay.
Yeah, so since last July, I've been doing, I started this position as professor at York University, so I've been doing a lot of teaching over Zoom. And this is classroom teaching, so not one-on-one violin teaching. For example, the first semester I taught a course that was a music history survey course for second years for all music students, whether they're coming from jazz or whether they're coming from fiddle backgrounds or whether they're coming from classical piano. And then this term, I'm teaching course in community music for more upper year undergraduate students. And so that's looking at organizations that use music as a vehicle for transformative social change. So organizations like El Sistema is one of the most classic ones. But even, I would argue something like South Saskatchewan Youth Orchestra, even though that's what we call formal learning, it's still very much a community-based music ensemble. So yeah, that's been a lot of fun too, because you get to see music in a broader picture. So I've been doing a lot of teaching, but then also still doing some projects performance-wise, particularly with my duo partner, Megan Malatz. We've done some recordings. We're really lucky in Montreal because even though we still have curfews and we still have, no restaurants open and no bars, but we can still do recordings. That's one exception that the government has made, which has been really great because we did a video series. So we didn't do an official album, but we did, I think, 7 different video recordings of works that we wanted to be available on YouTube. So these are works by underrepresented composers. For example, David McIntyre gave us a piece that had never been recorded before, and so we wanted to do that. We've also recorded pieces by Florence Price, who's an African-American composer, BIPOC composers like Danuque Wadratne, female composers like Jocelyn Morlock, who wrote us a piece for our tour. So yeah, it's been nice to at least have some performance projects, even though they're not for live audiences.
So do you still practice I don't know if you ever practice every day. I was not a good practicer. But do you still play every day? Or
right now, no, I actually am not being a very great, what's the word? Like diligent practicer. Because sometimes I do find myself getting into ruts where I'm just going through the motions and then a half hour has gone by and I'm sort of thinking like, where's my brain here? I'm either thinking about an email that I need to answer, or I'm thinking about, oh, my students had this worry. So if my brain's not in it, I'm not doing it. That's what's been the hardest part of this pandemic year, because I feel much more motivated to practice when I have a project that I'm going towards. But then I've also realized that, well, if you don't have projects for a whole year, which quite frankly is the first time it's happened to me, that you are going to lose your facility. You are going to lose your vibrato is going to get slower. Your intonation is not going to be as clean. Your pinky is going to get, less strong. So you have to keep those things when you're using these fine muscles going. And so, yeah, it's gotten better. But when the pandemic first started, like I took like a whole month off because I was just like, well, I just need time to sort of step away because, yeah, everything's not as it was. And I don't believe in practicing just to force yourself to do it. I will say at the stage I'm at, not because I don't need to improve, I always need to improve, but because sometimes if you're doing it for the wrong reasons, then you're actually going to be taking away the passion that you have for it. Which is what keeps you doing it for decades. When you're a student, when you're, before university, you don't have time to do that. Like, I wished I practiced more when I was a teenager, because that is such key time for you to build up muscles and build up, brain synapses and figure out what you need to do. And if you take a year off of doing that, you never get that year back. So I don't say I condone not practicing, but I do think that the best practicing is done when you are fully committed to it. So right now, what I'm trying to do is like really set aside time where I can be completely committed to it, not have to answer to anyone as part of my job, but just have at least a couple hours where I can just be Amy, a violinist working on projects, discovering repertoire. And lately that's been really helpful, and it's allowed me to create time in my day to practice.
I think that's interesting though, because I like the whole idea of having a goal as something to practice towards, because you're right, like I graduated from university and I have a bachelor degree, but I graduated and then went, well, now what do I do? Right? Because up until that point, you've been practicing for exams, and then you're practicing for juries, and you've always got the next thing that you have to practice for. And then it's like, well, do I know what I even like to play anymore? Like it's finding that passion and bringing it back is an interesting, I mean, that's a journey in itself.
Yeah, and I do think that that's the blessing and the curse of school, because school, it's the only way that you have the resources you need in order to actually, for example, take a whole year to learn a piece of music that you're going to perform once. You never do that after school, right? That's just not, I mean, I shouldn't say never, but very rarely. And you don't have the same, like when you're at school, you're practicing way more because you're, as in those practice hallways with other people around you who are passionate about it, and you have the time and the space. And so if you and your teacher want to just work on your bow technique and open strings for a year, you can do that because you're at school. But as a professional, you can't easily do that because you have to learn the notes for the concert. So school is a great bubble for that, but it's very much a bubble. I know a lot of people who have said that they figured out what they liked about music and their playing totally changed after they graduated school. Yeah. And I think I'm also one of those examples, because even though I was so lucky to have these incredible teachers who, like, still to this day, I'm so grateful for what they were able to give me in terms of technique and tools, but you're doing it in an artificial context, and you're still always doing it. You're playing, whether it's your Bach or your concerto or your showpiece, you're playing it in a way that you think people might like, because that's what you've been told is the standard. But you don't create that standard, because quite frankly, as an undergrad, you don't know how to create to the same extent. But then once you graduate, or I found in my master's, that's when it changed for me. When you're given that license to just create and do it differently than all the recordings do it, or, give your own voice to it, not because your teacher told you to do it uniquely, but because you feel like you're confident enough to do that, then all of a sudden you're like, okay, you're actually saying something interesting now. You're not just replicating. And that's so hard in classical music, because it takes so much time to just get to that point where you can even replicate, and where you have that technique to play that Tchaikovsky concerto. It's like a feat to be able to get through that 45-minute piece. You know what I mean? So to get to that point as an undergrad, you're not even thinking about what's your own voice. But then after you graduate as a student, and you live and die by whether or not people want to hear you play, it's all about, well, what do you have to offer? It's not, the public doesn't care if, well, you did a weird fingering there. Like, they don't know that. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be gained from creating these opportunities in the community outside of a school institution.
Well, yeah, and I would say I would agree with the people you've heard. Like, I definitely became a better musician after I was done school. But I know for me in my journey, it was also about finding my own voice just in my own life. Like, it's also that, like, I didn't have the same voice when I was in grade 12 as I had, as a 30-year-old mother. So it part of it's just even developing as a person, from my perspective anyway. Yeah.
Completely agree. 100% agree. Because when you're 20 years old, you're a third year student at university, but you don't know anything yet. I mean, at least I hope not. At least I hope you have, that would be weird if you did. So it's nice to be able to be a sponge when you're a student and just like see as many different concepts as you can, hear as many different pieces as you can, learn, how to work with different groups of people, different personalities, people that you didn't grow up working with, and just sort of be a sponge to all that. But then, yeah, once you have more distance from that, you can really sort of be who you want to be. And then usually that's way more convincing than what someone else tells you is good.
Yeah. Interesting. So, what do you know now about being a full-time musician that you wish you had known when you were younger?
Yeah, that it's not going to be one thing. It's not going to be one so when I say one thing, one activity that you're doing as a professional musician, it's going to be an umbrella. And at least well, see, but I'm trying to think if that's just me personally, but no, I think I can speak for most professional musicians by saying that, that it's a whole bunch of different hats that you wear. And actually, looking back, I should have realized that as a kid, because my teacher Ed was totally like that. Like, even though he was concertmaster of the symphony, which was sort of his main title, he was also my teacher and he taught other students. He was also an arranger. He like spent so much of his time arranging pieces for this Amadeus orchestra, or for his trio contrasts with Pauline and David, or for the chamber players. He did a Simpsons arrangement that they would take to schools as part of the RSO chamber players. And then he was also, someone who could do gypsy parties. And so like, yes, there's different genres of music, but what I'm more trying to say are these different hats that he would wear. And he never felt like he was one role, one person. I don't think he ever felt like he was Ed Minovich, the concertmaster of Regina Symphony. Of course, he was proud to be that, but I don't think that defined him. And I think that's why he was so willing to, like, he started a whole project with the kids at the Piapot Reserve, teaching them music lessons with the violin. And you can only really do that when you realize that, okay, as a professional musician, there's much more I can give my community than those, few orchestra concerts I give a year. So yeah, I think that was really refreshing for me to realize that, when I realized I don't have to win an orchestra job in order to make it as a musician. I love playing with orchestras. Like, I would probably say it's part of the reason, maybe the reason why I went into music in the first place. And if you ask me as an undergrad, that would have been my goal. Okay, play in an orchestra. And I'm really glad that I got that opportunity. But at the same time, I was totally relieved when I realized I can totally contribute to society and to community as a musician without having to win an audition. And it's really, if you win the audition too, that's great. Like, there's just so many different options.
Awesome. So, okay, so just thinking about, because I've heard you talk about several different arrangements of things that kids will enjoy. Do you have a favorite piece to play when you are visiting the schools, or just in general? Do you have a favorite piece that you have played?
Okay, so with the string quartet, Oh man, there's so many options because it's funny how certain things will surprise you, and they will like them like way more than adults do, which is really interesting. For example, one year we did a program of contrasts. So the loudest piece written for a string quartet, the quietest piece, the shortest piece. We did not play Morton Feldman's 6-hour longest string quartet, but that went over super well. So for example, the shortest piece was by Webern, and it's, I think, about 15 seconds long. And you could hear a pin drop when we played that piece for an assembly of 500 kids. And it's not loud. And they're just like there with you because they want to. So we love anything that makes it feel like, okay, you have them in the palm of your hand, they're listening, anything where they're listening. And then of course, anything that they can sing along to is also really fun. So we always end with a song that they know the words to, whether it's Frozen, whether it's Carly Rae Jepsen, Call Me Maybe. What did we do, Stephen, at your school? It was one that your kids were really into.
I want to say Thunder. I don't know if that's the
it
name.
Was. Yes, exactly. And remind me the artist again. This is terrible. I'm getting so bad with my memory. Okay, you're gonna look it up. Great, wonderful. But anyways, you would recognize it. And they were all like doing actions to it and singing along. So there's that. But then I would say the contemporary music is so fun to play for them because they just love it. They love the effects. Anything that has an effect, they're right into.
That's awesome. Okay, so I know we're coming up on time when everybody else gets to ask questions. I will just, my last question is there anything else you want to tell us before we open the floor to everybody else?
I just want to say that I am so proud, and Megan and I talk about this a lot. Megan, for those of you who don't know, is from outside of Weyburn, and so she also grew up in Saskatchewan. And she was also very grateful to have Cherith Alexander, who many of you might know, as her piano teacher. And I think that Regina and Saskatchewan, and I would say even the Prairie provinces in general, have a huge resource when it comes to their community of not only teachers and the conservatory, and that's all important, but also like the parents, the people who hand down tips on how to prepare your child for an RCM exam or whatever it may be. But this whole community that helps the music education outside of public schools in Regina is something that we've realized is really, really special. And we benefited from it. We didn't know it at the time. We just thought it was normal. And then we go away and we sort of realize like, wow, that sense of support is what made us have the confidence to do what we do today. And I think that that's something that at least the adults shouldn't take for granted and should pat themselves on the back, because it's really amazing. So thanks, Christa, for helping facilitate that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And thank you for all of your thoughts. So I'm going to turn the recording off.